We're going to start this officially. We'll just go on to start this right now. So officially welcome everyone to the webinar learning series. My name is Orlando Ferrer. I've spoken with the majority of everyone on this call right now. And if I haven't, nice to meet you. Please feel free to reach out to me and you'll see my contact information at the end of today's talk. Today we're going to start a series which we're going to take a project, an iDocs document project, from start to end. And that means that we're going to take it from the design to the mapping of data onto that document, all the way to actually adding automation and running it at the very end through the whole process. And today's session, we're actually going to, on part one, we're going to review the overall project, and we're going to start the project with the design aspects or part of it altogether. So we're just going to run through that right now. And we're going to start with talking about the actual project that is going to happen here. And again, just as a reminder, if I missed you, this is going to be part 1 of 4 in the series. We're going to have this every Friday during February. We're going to keep this down to about 20 minutes roughly, trying to keep this at a steady pace. And this is being recorded, so you will have an opportunity to be able to listen to this later on YouTube. And if you have any questions and answers, please, or any questions along the way, please feel free to send me a question via the question chat box, or if you have anything later on, feel free to reach out to me as well. All right, so we're going to start off with what the whole project that we're going to work on for the next 4 weeks will be. And this is just a flow of it all together. And we're going to just go down that line here of actually shown to you. We're going to start off today with the items that really are on our PC, which are going to be the designing of the form. We're going to talk about what the form is made of, the components, what some useful items to think about before actually starting to design your form, and things to look out for, and also how to work that together with your information that you have on a spool file. So we're going to start this process today. Ultimately, we're going to end up with a form application. And in our case, for those that don't know, find out that a form application is really the components put together, or a folder or a vessel, if you may, that is made up of the design, the mapping instructions, and attributes. If it's going to be letter size, legal size, portrait, if it's going to be correlated, any of those items in there. But we'll get into those details and you'll see how that comes into play. Then we're going to actually add some features into this that are going to be actually useful for us here, and setting up the automation. So this form application ultimately is going to be used with the iDocs engine. We'll be picking this up in the later classes, where we're actually going to set up the iDocs engine, plus we're actually going to set up smart routing. And smart routing is really a process in which we configure the application to route in different areas. In our example for our workshop, we're going to actually be setting this up to email automatically to recipient, and also to an LQ that's going to be printed out. Along the way, we're actually going to also send this form application when it's being processed, and we're going to actually set up an IPDF monitor. And the IPDF monitor, to think about, is really another engine or system of engine that's going to take the PCL file that's produced when we merge the spool file with the form application. Is going to get an LQ is going to get monitored, that will get picked up and converted into, that output is going to convert it into a PDF, and then send off to a directory on our system. And as well, as part of this, I also want to touch upon setting an iMail server application and an iMail engine. This is going to be useful in case if we do have a bad email account. Let's say somebody did put the @ twice on their email, or it can't be actually sent out for a reason, then we're going to actually have the iMail server monitor an LQ for that information, and we're going to send that out to a recipient. So we'll go, and the same thing, we'll do that as well for the print jobs as well. So in this whole process, we're going to touch upon the design, setting it up, the mapping, some detailed information on working with form application, including conditional mapping. We're going to work with the engine setting this up and actually setting up a whole system in which we process form application using smart routing. Also, we're going to set up the IPDF monitor and actually have that running, including also an IMail server and its application. So this is going to be the 4-week process that we're going to be talking about. Later on, I know some people that are maybe a little more advanced are looking at Smart Router and capture pieces. We have other seminars talking about those features and how they come into play. We will get into those as well. So first, let's start off with the finished product. I want you to see what the finished product really looks like, and we're going to talk about some of those details in this project. Right now, we actually have this form application which we created for as what we're going to end up with. So this is a nice little form application, which is an invoice, and specifically I'm just going to shrink that down so you see the whole combined form application. Get a look at it here. It's a whole page, and if I swing over to the second page of our example, it's still a different invoice with different information, less lines, and this all comes into play in how we design our actual form. You also notice as I scroll back and forth, the QR code changes quite a bit, also our barcode on the bottom, and also the address. So let's talk about some of those details right now. Let me just bring this up a little higher here on resolution. Okay, so this seems like a pretty simple design for the most part, but there's a lot of complexity that actually has gone into this, or at least some thought behind it all. So I want to talk about this. Let's get into the top of the form itself. Just before you design a form, you may want to think about some of the aspects of the design itself. This does come in handy for not only the way it looks aesthetically, but also the functionality of the document on the receiving side, on how it can improve your process along the way. In this case, we want to improve the process of making sure we get paid on time. So we'll get added some features to this that will hopefully help us, and also even some marketing aspects of it. For the marketing aspects, we actually, in the original design, we left this little section in here blank, and we created a special that is actually, in this case, since we're in February, we have a March special. Notice it's all green, and this is, a fictional hop company that we did. So next month's special, buy 2 cases of Noble hops and get the 3rd case free. This is triggered by actually the date, by the month. So we can actually stack a whole bunch of different ads based on different triggers. If it's a regional, if it's a date, all sorts of different triggers that we can do. And I'll show you how to do this as well. But this design will always change along the way. So in March, we'll have a different one. In April, you'll have a different ad that goes out. Just a little marketing that helps out along the way. On the Bill To section here, we've actually aligned this up with an envelope, with a Windows envelope. So when this gets folded and stuffed into an envelope, you don't have to print an envelope. This is actually lined up specifically to show up within a Windows envelope right here on the Bill To section. We've actually added a QR code on the top as well. This is actually picking up information like the invoice number, invoice date, the terms, things like that. Reason we put one in there is even as a lot of you on this call right now are moving into this as well with our iView product and Capture product, so are many other companies along the way. And invoices that are coming in need to be identified. This will make it easier for your invoice to be recognized as an invoice with pertinent information that will help your invoice get processed quickly without any delays. So we give some information to the receiving folks, and the good news is the easier we make this for somebody receiving it to get it into their payment system, the better it is for you, because you'll be able to improve hopefully your payment cycles along the way. And along that line, we've actually added a couple of things here on the right-hand side that would be beneficial. One is clearly identifying what type of document this is. If there's going to be on the Capture side this document needs to be identified as an actual invoice. Also, in the boxes of each of these items, on the left-hand side, you could even center these if you wanted to, but we left plenty of padding around the text. So if somebody needs to anchor on a capture system this word or this term, either invoice number, invoice date, or even ship to, we give them enough space that they can do that. We try to give ample space so they can actually anchor on these terms. Again, this is all in an attempt to make it easier for the recipient to be able to identify your invoice, clearly identify the parts that it needs, and process this as quickly as possible along the way. I'm going to get back up this an actual uniqueness to total due, and I'm going to get back to that here in a second. On the design aspects, we've actually put it a fold here, but you can even put a cut here line, because we actually want the remit to be sent back to us with a check or some sort of payment that they're doing. And as well, we've actually put the total section, again, nice and clear, make sure that they have plenty of space to extract the information when on their side, as well as make it easier for our folks coming in or even our own scanning system to grab that information, as well as putting a barcode for the invoice number. So when this comes in, we'll actually scan the invoice number. We can actually go back into our system, look into our database and say, yeah, hey, this is invoice 180 202 1742, and be able to compare the information and make sure everything's factual, and then compare that to the check that we've received to close out that invoice along the way. And also for design aspects, we've actually provided the person who's going to pay this invoice ultimately also a return envelope. It's a window envelope, and we've actually lined up the return address in the window envelope as well, right in line. So just a couple of things on the design aspects of it. Now, remember I did say something about uniqueness about the total section, and even that's actually going to be the totals down here as well. So I'm going to show you something on the actual spoof file and how that looks and why this comes into play. Right here is our spoof file that we're going to be working with from the AS400, the IBM I, and in here, just a couple of notable things. We have a page number. We have some information. I've actually put my email address in the spoof file, including an OutQ. We're going to use that for the smart routing options. We can do this from a database and also from the spoof file itself. In this case, just to show the ease of it and how to initially set this up, I'm just going to take it from the spoof file. All the information that we need, that we actually created the document from, came from here. And you notice that a couple of things. One is on the build to address, you notice how long that city is in space. And if I go to the next page, it's a shorter one. Well, when we map this out, we're going to make sure that we actually give ourselves enough space on the mapping to capture that information. And then if there's anything within that same area, it's still going to capture it. It's just going to have some blank space. So we always make sure that we give ourselves more of space when mapping the information to the maximum length of your data. So just know your spoof files, know your data, make sure that you know what's going on in there. And as I toggle back and forth on the pages between pages 1 and 2, you'll notice that page 1 has an itemized section of 10 rows long. With that being said, the total section in the spoof file is actually down here as well. And I forgot what row this is exactly, but when we look at it specifically, you'll see that. If I go to page 2 on this, you notice that the total section moves up because there's only 5 items of information, of detailed information. Now, there's nowhere else on this area here where a balance due is or our total section is. So I need to figure out, and we'll show you how we did this, how to grab this information and not any other information. Because if I map these coordinates right here and I go to the next page, I'm going to completely miss that information because it's higher. And also, we want to specifically make sure we get that information. So we actually use some conditional mapping and some options in the triggers to say we are going to grab that information from the beginning columns to the end columns, anywhere from the top to the bottom. And we'll show you how to do that conditionally. So when you run into those issues, you can take care of those. All right. So at this point, I'm just kind of moving a little quickly here because we want to make sure we stay in our time span. We're actually going to go into the design, and we're just going to really begin the design, and I'm going to show you how to go from design to mapping, and then we're going to get into some details behind that. Now, most of you are familiar with our design tool that we have is FlashForm 5, and majority of you have used this and are using this, so not too bad, but I will touch upon it. On the design, I actually created a form that was, again, very basic. I don't have any information in the middle because we're going to reserve the space for our ads that we're going to put in and what we're going to do for our marketing. I kept the lines on this just to keep it light and keep it fresh looking and a little more, the trends have always changed from looks, and if you have a specific company look and image, you want to incorporate that into your actual documents that go out to the public. So in this case, we took it another step further. I also wanted to make this light in the sense that I know that in modern time or current time right now, documents are getting captured, and I want to make this light as possible when it gets scanned in. So I'm using light colors like blue. Instead of using dark lines on the edges, I'm using grayscale. Just some areas I'm using it black text, just where I really want to emphasize what that text is and that information. And the same thing in the remittance area, because when I get these, I don't necessarily want to have a heavy scan or a lot of memory being used. So I'm trying to make these a little lighter on what gets in here. And I've also made a lot of white space as well for those options, for those things when getting scanned in. So this is just a simple thing on design. Now, one of the things that have changed over time now is that this was primarily the way we take design our forms. But don't forget, you can actually use Word, Excel, and different design tools to design. You may actually already have a design that's somewhere else on a PDF or somewhere like that. That's not a problem. All you have to do is actually just move this over to our mapping tool for the mapping, which is the next step. In order to do that, you just go to Print, select the iDocs driver from whatever design tool you're in, and this will bring your design into the mapping tool. So you can actually design from wherever you want. If it's Word, Excel, PDF, we don't really care. In there as well. In this case, we just used our actual designer that we've been using. And once you print to the iDocs driver, your design comes into the IMAP tool itself. Here's already a project that's actually been designed. We're going to get into this more details on the next part of our webinar series. However, just wanted to show you this, that it would come in here, you bring down your spool file onto the right-hand side, and then you do all your mapping and line up and get everything organized the way you need to before sending it up to the IBMI and creating your form application. So at this point, I'm going to go back here, and I'm just going to talk about, we'll at least start the process of getting some of the design elements going on what do we do when we actually work with designing. So I'm going to go into Canvas. Usually for working with this tool specifically, I stick to the top items on our tool section on the left-hand side here. And if we actually go and select these, we can actually bring in an image in. I'll use the image option, select my browser to look in, and actually I should have done this a little earlier, preset this, but this is live. I'm going to actually go into our marketing section, go into the graphics that we have on there, and I'm going to go pick up our logo. For the options, if you had a image that was actually already exactly positioned the way you want it or in size, you can just use the original size. 99% of the time, you can scale that object or that image in the object proportionally. So once I hit OK, it's going to import the image, and the image will scale proportionally into that object. So if I expand that object out on the canvas, shrink it in, it'll stay proportional. And that will help in fixing it where you want to. Lines and things that we use in here are clicking here. Again, some basic design items that we normally use are You can make a straight line. You get this free fall. You anchor it. You move it around. If you hold the shift key, it gives you a perfect horizontal line, a 45-degree line, or a vertical line. So we actually have some options. You can actually create that. You can actually copy that by hitting Control-C. Control-V will paste it. Do a whole pile of those. You can highlight those. And the tool which I use extensively is our alignment tool. So if you go into Format, Align, you can align this to the furthest point that you want it. So if I did it to my left, it'll be the furthest point on my left. If I did it to my right, it'll be the furthest point to my right, the top, and so on. So actually, it's all now perfectly aligned. The other aspect of this, you can actually select your object appearance and change what those lines look like. In this case, we can actually give it a nice thin look, dashes. You can give it different weights if you wanted to. I prefer using hairline. I think it gives it a nice sharp look. You can change the colors on these if you wanted to as well. All sorts of different things that you can do with this. So notice we changed the line sizes. Select them, move them around. Okay, do that. There we go. Move them around. Same thing with circles. Make ovals. Hold the shift key, gives you a perfect circle. Rectangles, squares, the same idea. Now, with these elements here, you can actually start building up your design form. So if I took this actual square and I said, okay, I'm going to start with a actual rectangle that I want to put here. I want to change my sizing on this. You just start building it up. And I'm just going to show you that right there. I'm actually going to change the colors that I'm using. I'm going to actually use gray color. And you start building this up. Now, you can do the same thing. You can just select, copy, it's the same size, and start multiplying these across the board. You can also set up for text, a window that's going across, and you can add some of these things in here. So if I want to call this my invoice number, I can justify that either center on the vertical lines. I can actually move that all the way around by selecting my options. In this case, I'm just going to have it on my left, and I'm going to actually give it some spacing on the left of that text, and I'm actually going to change my object appearance on the background, and I'm going to give that a blue background. Actually, that's very blue. So, and I'm going to uncheck the clear. Change the blues here a little. And I'm going to actually line that up to my box. Going to snap it to my left. Shrink that a little. And I'm just going to move it up using my arrow keys to get it into position. And once you create something that you're happy with, you can actually select the whole thing, copy, paste, and move it to your next spot that you want to, and so on. So this is how we created those boxes on our original design, which are right here, and that's the whole process. So you can continue doing these boxes, expanding them out, and doing the columns, and you pretty soon build a whole form based on that simple technique. All right, so that is the point that we're going to get up to today. Just like the cake, because we're actually on time crunch, we're just like the cake. Here's what we're going to end up with on the form. You saw some basic techniques on the designing. This is part one really, or the very beginning of just talking about the actual project itself in which we're designing. Next week when we talk we're going to get a little more into the designing aspect, and we're going to actually do the mapping for that form application and start adding the actual smart writing configuration. And that's going to be on next week. So we're going to try to keep to the 20 to 30 minutes. We're at 25 minutes now. Next week, we're going to do designing of the mapping, preparing the form application, and getting up into the AS400 and start adding those smart writing options in there. So hopefully this was helpful at this point. Next Friday, it's going to be at the same time, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. In the meantime, if you have any questions that come up, please feel free to give me a call directly or through the main line, or send me an email and let me know what specific questions you have. More than happy to answer things. Again, this project is going to build up all the way through for the mapping, the form, and all the way through the engine buildup. So hopefully you found this useful, and hopefully you'll find the whole series useful. Let me know your feedback, and thank you for attending today's webinar. Next Friday, same time. We'll go from there. All right. Thank you.